King Charles had stayed silent for years, but the moment Meghan Markle allegedly launched her most explosive attack yet, something inside the palace appeared to snap. Suddenly, whispers became warnings, warnings became ultimatums, and what had once looked like a family feud transformed into a full-scale royal war threatening to destroy whatever remained of the fragile connection between Buckingham Palace and the Sussex household. The question was no longer whether relations had broken down, the question was whether the final blow had finally arrived. The drama erupted amid claims of an unprecedented media battle that seemed to be consuming everyone in its path. What made this situation even more extraordinary was that the conflict was not simply taking place between Harry, Meghan, and the palace. Instead, the battlefield appeared to stretch directly into the heart of the British media itself. Suddenly, journalists who once reported from the same newsroom were seemingly fighting separate wars, pushing completely different versions of reality and forcing the public into a state of confusion unlike anything seen before. One side of the story painted a picture of a furious monarch who had finally reached the end of his patience. According to those claims, King Charles was allegedly preparing the most severe punishment available, stripping Harry and Meghan of every remaining royal connection and cutting the final thread that linked them to the institution they had spent years criticizing. It was a dramatic narrative, a powerful king, a final judgment, a royal execution without a crown. But then came the contradiction. Another group of voices insisted the exact opposite was happening behind palace walls. Instead of punishment, they described reconciliation. Instead of revenge, they described diplomacy. According to that version, conversations were allegedly taking place behind closed doors, with efforts focused on bringing Harry and Meghan back into dialogue with the family rather than pushing them further away. Two stories, two completely different futures, and both could not be true. That contradiction became the spark that ignited a media firestorm. Suddenly, the public found itself trapped between competing narratives, each claiming access to insiders, each insisting they knew the truth. Every article seemed to cancel another article. Every source contradicted another source. The more information appeared, the less clarity anyone had. The result was chaos. Questions flooded social media. Was King Charles preparing forgiveness, or was he preparing punishment? Was reconciliation possible, or had the bridge already burned beyond repair? The king's response only intensified the mystery. According to those narratives, each new revelation chipped away at trust until eventually nothing remained. Every project, every interview, every disclosure, another crack in an already damaged relationship. But just when it seemed the palace narrative was gaining momentum, Meghan Markle allegedly entered the battlefield herself, and that is where the situation exploded. Reports claim Meghan became furious after learning that palace insiders were describing the Sussexes as untrustworthy. Rather than ignoring the allegations, she reportedly responded with extraordinary force. What followed was not a carefully worded statement. It was described as a direct attack aimed squarely at King Charles himself. The accusations were stunning. Meghan allegedly portrayed herself as someone who had suffered behind palace walls while presenting King Charles as a public figure whose private behavior allegedly contradicted his public image. The language attributed to her was fiery, emotional, and designed to provoke maximum attention. But that was only the beginning, because Meghan's most controversial claim centered on an alleged private meeting from 2019. According to the accusations, she claimed to have knowledge of conversations that supposedly took place behind closed doors involving senior members of the royal family. The alleged discussion, according to her version, revolved around titles, status, and her future within the institution. If true, it would have been explosive. If false, it would have been catastrophic. And that is exactly why the palace reaction became so dramatic. The allegation struck directly at the credibility of King Charles and even touched the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. Suddenly, what began as another chapter in a family dispute was evolving into something much larger. This was no longer simply about relationships. It was about competing versions of history, competing versions of truth, competing versions of reality. As headlines spread across the world, observers began asking a dangerous question. Had Meghan just exposed a hidden royal conspiracy? The atmosphere changed the moment King Charles allegedly decided that silence was no longer enough. For years, according to this storyline, the palace had absorbed criticism, endured accusations, and watched the Sussex saga dominate headlines around the world. But now, faced with Meghan Markle's latest claims regarding the mysterious 2019 meeting, the king reportedly chose a completely different strategy. Instead of another denial, instead of another carefully crafted statement. Instead of another attempt to ignore the noise, he allegedly prepared something far more dangerous. Evidence, the announcement sent shockwaves through the media landscape. Reports claimed that King Charles intended to release records connected to the very meeting Meghan had referenced. Suddenly, the battle was no longer about who could tell the most convincing story. It became a fight over documentation, records, and competing versions of the past. Supporters of the palace celebrated what they viewed as a coming moment of vindication. Critics wondered whether the move would only deepen an already toxic conflict. But everyone agreed on one thing: the stakes had never been higher. As rumors about the record spread, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Every commentator seemed to have a theory. Every headline hinted at revelations. Every discussion became more dramatic than the last. Then came claims that the contents of the documents painted a picture radically different from the one Meghan had allegedly presented. According to the narrative, the records contained discussions regarding concerns inside the royal household, disciplinary considerations, and internal evaluations of various situations that had reportedly unfolded behind palace walls. The release was portrayed as a devastating counterstrike designed to challenge years of public allegations and reshape the entire conversation. The effect was immediate. Media outlets exploded with analysis. Social media transformed into a battlefield. Supporters and critics rushed to interpret every reported detail. Some claimed the documents destroyed Meghan's credibility. Others argued that the palace was simply defending itself using its enormous institutional power. But one thing became impossible to ignore. The conflict had moved beyond private family tensions and evolved into a global spectacle where every accusation generated another counter-accusation and every revelation produced even more questions. Then came the most dramatic consequence of all. Reports suggested that discussions surrounding Harry and Meghan's royal titles had intensified dramatically. Commentators began speculating that the palace was preparing significant action to distance itself from the Sussex brand permanently. The possibility alone generated enormous attention. For years, their titles had remained one of the most controversial symbols of the entire dispute. To supporters, they represented a legitimate connection to royal heritage. To critics, they represented privileges attached to people who had repeatedly challenged the institution itself. As speculation intensified, palace statements reportedly emphasized protecting the dignity, stability, and reputation of the monarchy. Those words became the center of endless debate. Was this about protecting tradition? Was it about punishment? Or was it about drawing a final line after years of public conflict? Nobody seemed capable of agreeing. Meanwhile, public opinion appeared more divided than ever. Some observers believed Meghan had finally gone too far with her allegations. Others believed the palace was engaging in a calculated campaign to protect itself. Every interview created another argument. Every article fueled another controversy. Every attempt to clarify the situation somehow made it even more confusing. The deeper people looked, the murkier everything became. Yet beneath all the headlines, one uncomfortable reality remained. Trust had completely collapsed. The relationship that once appeared capable of healing now seemed buried beneath years of accusations, interviews, books, documentaries, statements, leaks, and counterleaks. The emotional distance between the two sides looked wider than ever. Even the possibility of reconciliation began to feel like a distant memory rather than a realistic outcome.